the Vatican. The 18th of August, 1503, the hour of Vespers. He is 72 years old. He has been Pope for 11 years, Vice-Chancellor for 35 before that, and a cardinal since the age of 25. 12 days ago, he dined at the vineyard of Cardinal Adriano Castellesi in the August heat of Rome. 6 days ago, the fever began. His physicians drew 14 ounces of blood. He vomited green bile on the 15th. Medicine was administered at 9 in the morning on the 17th. On the 18th, he confessed to Bishop Gamboa of Carinola, received communion sitting upright in bed with 5 cardinals present, and told them he felt very bad. Extreme unction was administered. By late afternoon, Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI, Vicar of Christ, Sovereign of the Papal States, and the man who had divided the New World between Spain and Portugal with a single document, was dead. What followed belongs to the papal master of ceremonies, Johann Burchard, who recorded it with the detachment of a man filling out a form. The face had changed to the colour of the blackest cloth and was covered in blue-black spots. The nose was swollen. The mouth was distended. The tongue had bent back double. The lips seemed to fill everything. Burchard wrote that the appearance of the face was more horrifying than anything that had ever been seen or reported. 6 labourers forced the bloated corpse into a coffin that was too small for it, making blasphemous jokes about the Pope as they worked. They rolled him in an old carpet. The priests of St. Peter's Basilica refused to receive the body. One prelate attended the burial, Titan the most powerful man in Christendom, and Rome could not find a dignified pair of hands to carry him. Upstairs in the rooms of the Apostolic Palace, his servants were already looting the silver. He left behind 6 children. What happened to them is the story of a family that had everything because one man held the papacy and lost everything because the papacy cannot be inherited. Cesare, the eldest son, had conquered half of Italy. He had resigned the cardinalate, the first man in history to do so, taken a French duchy, married a French princess, and built a military empire across the Romagna so ruthless that Machiavelli used him as the model prince. On the night his father died, Cesare lay in the next room with the same fever, his skin peeling off after his physicians submerged him in a jar of iced water. Within 4 years he would be imprisoned in Spain, escape from a fortress by rope in the middle of the night, and die in the mud outside a castle in Navarre at 31 years old, stripped naked, stabbed at least 25 times, his body identified only because his squire recognised the stolen armour and wept. Lucrezia, the daughter, had been married 3 times by the age of 21, each marriage arranged by her father to serve an alliance that would be discarded the moment it expired. Her first husband was forced to sign a confession of impotence. Her second husband was strangled in his bed by Cesare's personal enforcer after Lucrezia had spent weeks nursing him back from a previous assassination attempt, preparing all his food herself to prevent poisoning. She would survive the collapse and reinvent herself as the Duchess of Ferrara, become the patron whom the poet Bembo loved and the Chevalier Bayard called a pearl on this earth, and die at 39 after her 10th childbirth, dictating a final letter to the Pope asking for a blessing on her soul. Juan, the favourite, was already dead. 6 years before Alexander's death, Juan had been pulled from the Tiber with 9 stab wounds, his throat cut, 30 golden ducats still in his purse. The murder was never solved. Alexander's grief had been total. His legacy would be stranger than anyone present at the funeral could have imagined. Juan's great-grandson would become a Jesuit saint. Geoffrey, the youngest of the 4 acknowledged children, had been married at 12 to a bride of 16. His father had privately doubted he was even his son, but he would lose every papal grant overnight and retreat to a minor principality in southern Italy, where he lived in silence until his death. And then there was Giovanni, known as the Infans Romanus, the child of Rome. 2 papal bulls were issued on the same date, the 1st of September 1501, claiming 2 different fathers. The public bull named Cesare. The secret bull corrected the record and named Alexander himself. His mother was never identified. After the collapse, he was sent to Ferrara to live with Lucrezia, accepted as her half-brother, and vanished into obscurity. If you're enjoying this, subscribing is the best way to support the channel. It's free and it helps us keep going. Everything these children had was built on a structural impossibility. A pope's power dies with him. Unlike a king, a pope cannot pass his throne to his son. Unlike a duke, a pope cannot bequeath his territories by blood. Every title Alexander granted, every territory Cesare conquered under papal authority, every alliance sealed by a Borgia marriage existed only as long as Rodrigo Borgia's heart continued to beat. The children were born into the most powerful office in Christendom, and the only one designed to erase their inheritance the moment it mattered most. The machinery that created them began in Tiber, a town near Valencia in the Crown of Aragon, where Rodrigo de Borgia was born on the 1st of January 1431. His father died before Rodrigo turned 6. His mother was the sister of Alfonso de Borgia, a Spanish clergyman whose election as Pope Calixtus III on the 8th of April 1455, and it transformed the family overnight. Rodrigo was summoned to Rome, studied law at the University of Bologna, adopted the Italianized surname Borgia, and on the 22nd of February 1456, at the age of 25, was made Cardinal Deacon of San Nicola in Cesare. The following year, Calixtus appointed him Vice-Chancellor of the Holy Roman Church. He held the position for 35 consecutive years, across 5 papacies. It made him one of the wealthiest men in Europe. A contemporary inventory of his possessions as a cardinal listed plate, pearls, clothes embroidered with silk and gold, books in every department of learning, and an immense amount of gold. He did not bother to become an ordained priest until 1468, at the age of 37. In 1460, Pope Pius II rebuked him in a letter for attending an all-night party in Siena, where, in the Pope's words, none of the allurements of love were lacking, and all Siena was talking about the affair. Rodrigo apologized. Nothing changed. When Pope Innocent VIII died on the 25th of July, 1492, the conclave convened on the 6th of August in the Sistine Chapel, its first use for a papal election. 23 of the 27 eligible cardinal electors attended. 3 ballots through the 10th of August produced no result. Then came the night of deal-making. Cardinal Ascanio Sforza received the vice-chancellorship, the Palazzo Borgia, the Castle of Nepi, the bishopric of Erlau worth 10,000 ducats annually, and reportedly 4 mule loads of silver delivered before dawn. Cardinal Orsini received the fortified towns of Monticelli and Soriano and the bishopric of Cartagena at 5,000 ducats a year. Cardinal Colonna received the Abbey of Subiaco at 3,000. Cardinal Savelli received Civita Castellana. The elderly Cardinal Gerardo of Venice, the deciding vote, received 5,000 ducats in cash. On the 4th ballot, the morning of the 11th of August, 1492, Rodrigo Borgia was elected unanimously. He took the name Alexander VI. A Roman epigram captured the transaction. Alexander sells the keys, the altar, Christ himself. He has a right to, for he bought them. The 2 women who bore his children occupied different decades and different roles. Vanozza de Catane, born on the 13th of July 1442 in Mantua, she became Rodrigo's mistress around 1470 when she was 28 and he was 39. She bore him 4 acknowledged children. Cesare in 1475, Giovanni, called Juan, around 1476, Lucrezia in 1480, and Geoffrey in 1481. To preserve appearances, Rodrigo arranged 3 successive marriages for her, to Domenico d'Arignano, Giorgio della Croce, and Carlo Canale. She became a shrewd businesswoman, managing at least 6 inns in Rome, controlling roughly a tenth of central Rome's hotel market. Her coat of arms bore the Borgia bull. By the late 1480s, Rodrigo's attention had shifted. Giulia Farnese was born in 1474 in Canino, making her 43 years younger than the cardinal. She married Orsino Orsini on the 21st of May, 1489, a marriage arranged to bring her into Borgia's orbit through Orsino's mother, Adriana de Mila, who was Rodrigo's cousin. By 1492, she was living in a palace adjacent to the Vatican, connected by a private passageway. Romans called her Sponsa Christi, Bride of Christ, and Concubina Papae. Her most consequential act had nothing to do with the bedroom. On the 20th of September, 1493, she secured a cardinal's hat for her brother Alessandro Farnese. Contemporaries called him the Petticoat Cardinal. He would become Pope Paul III in 1534, launch the Council of Trent, and commission Michelangelo's Last Judgment. Alexander VI's mistress shaped the future of the Catholic Church more permanently than Alexander VI. But every child was deployed as a political instrument from birth. Cesare was an apostolic prothonotary at 7, Bishop of Pamplona at 15, Archbishop of Valencia at 17, Cardinal of Santa Maria Nuova at 18. He was never ordained a priest. Lucrezia was betrothed at 11 and married at 13. Juan was handed the Duchy of Gandia without earning it. Geoffrey was married at 12 to a bride 4 years older. These were not children, they were currency. The injustice preceded the violence by decades. Every one of them was committed to a fate they had unchosen, inside a system that would abandon them the moment their father died. Alexander proved an unexpectedly effective administrator. He divided Rome into police districts, ordered investigations of unsolved murders, and set aside every Tuesday for public hearings of grievances. His bull Inter Caetera, issued on the 4th of May, 1493, drew a line down the Atlantic Ocean and divided the New World between Spain and Portugal. A decision formalised in the Treaty of Tordesillas the following year. The Jubilee year of 1500 brought massive pilgrim donations to the papal treasury. He sold 12 cardinalates in 1500 for 120,000 ducats and 9 more in 1503 for 130,000. He confiscated the properties of the Colonna, Savelli and Caetani families through fabricated charges. He excommunicated the Florentine preacher Savonarola on the 13th of May, 1497. Savonarola was tortured, hanged and burned on the 23rd of May of 1498. The engine of dynastic ambition was Cesare, and the event that freed him was his brother's murder. On the night of the 14th of June, 1497, the family gathered for dinner at Vanozza dei Catane's house near the church of San Pietro in Vincoli. Cesare was there, Lucrezia was there, Geoffrey and his wife Sancha of Aragon were there, Juan was there. Riding home afterward, Juan told Cesare near the Sforza Palace that he was going to find entertainment somewhere. He dismissed his retinue. He kept only a valet and a masked man who had been visiting him daily for a month. He was never seen alive again. His valet was found the next morning with a fatal wound, unable to speak before he died. 2 days passed. A Slavonian timber dealer named Giorgio came forward. And from his boat on the Tiber around 2 in the morning, he had watched 2 men emerge from an alley near the hospital of San Girolamo, look both ways, then signal. A rider on a white horse appeared, carrying a corpse slung across the saddle. They threw the body into the river. When the dead man's cloak floated to the surface, the rider threw stones until it sank. Asked why he had not reported this, Giorgio gave an answer that says more about Rome than any papal bull. In his day, he said, he'd seen as many as 100 corpses thrown into the river at that place on different nights without anybody troubling himself about it. On the 16th of June, fishermen pulled Juan's body from the Tiber. 9 stab wounds across the neck, head, legs and torso. His throat had been cut, his clothing was intact, every button fastened. 30 golden ducats remained in his purse. It was not a robbery, it was an execution. Alexander's grief was total. He locked himself in his chambers from Thursday to Sunday, refusing food, refusing sleep, refusing light. On the 19th of June, he appeared before the consistory and spoke the most famous words of his papacy. The Duke of Gandia is dead. A greater calamity could not have befallen us, for we bore him unbounded affection. Life has lost its interest for us. Had we 7 papacies, we would give them all to recall the Duke to life. He announced he would resign the tiara. He announced sweeping church reform. Neither happened. The investigation lasted over a year and was dropped abruptly, strongly suggesting Alexander discovered the killer was someone he could not punish. Juan's death opened the door that Cesare had been waiting for. On the 17th of August, 1498, he became the first person in history to resign the cardinalate, a resignation unanimously approved by the College of Cardinals. That same day, Louis XII of France granted him the Duchy of Valentinois. On the 10th of May, 1499, he married Charlotte d'Albret, sister of the King of Navarre. He was no longer a churchman, he was a conqueror. The Romagna campaigns that followed were systematic, city by city, funded by the sale of cardinalates and backed by French troops. Imola fell on the 9th of December, 1499, with an army of 14,000 to 15,000 men. Forlì's city gates opened on the 14th of December. The fortress held out until the 12th of January, 1500, and defended by the legendary Caterina Sforza, who was captured and taken to Rome. Pesaro was taken in October 1500. Giovanni Sforza, Lucrezia's first husband, fled to Venice. Rimini fell the same month. Faenza surrendered in April 1501 after a prolonged siege. The teenage lord Astorre III Manfredi was sent to Rome and later drowned in the Tiber on Cesare's orders. Urbino was captured in June 1502 through pure treachery. Guidobaldo da Montefeltro fled with only the clothes on his back. Camerino followed. In May 1501, Alexander named Cesare Duke of the Romagna. He employed Leonardo da Vinci as his military architect and engineer during 1502 and 1503. When Cesare's own hired captains conspired against him at La Magione in October 1502, then he answered with the most celebrated act of political treachery in Renaissance history. On the 31st of December, New Year's Eve, he lured his rebellious condottieri to Senigallia under the pretense of reconciliation. Vitellozzo Vitelli rode out to meet Cesare unarmed, wearing a green-lined cape, appearing dejected, as if conscious of his approaching death. Those are Machiavelli's words. Machiavelli was there. He had been present at Cesare's court as Florence's diplomatic envoy since the 7th of October and would remain until the 18th of January. He watched the trap close. Once inside a house, all 4 captains were seized at a signal. That night, Vitellozzo Vitelli and Oliverotto da Fermo were strangled back-to-back on a bench with a garroting cord turned by an iron bar. Paolo Orsini and Francesco Orsini, one Duke of Gravina, were held until word came that Alexander had arrested Cardinal Orsini in Rome, then strangled on the 18th of January 1503. Machiavelli sent his dispatch to Florence. In my view, he wrote, "They will not be alive tomorrow morning." In The Prince, Machiavelli made Cesare the central example of Chapter 7. I do not know what better precepts to give a new prince than the example of his actions. On Cesare's downfall, he was precise. Only the shortness of the life of Alexander and his own sickness frustrated his designs. Lucrezia's life had run parallel to Cesare's conquests, serving the same machinery from the opposite direction. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza, Lord of Pesaro, was contracted on the 12th of June, 1493. She was 13, he was 27. Dowry, 31,000 ducats. When the Sforza alliance lost its usefulness, Alexander demanded an annulment on grounds of non-consummation due to impotence. Sforza's response became the most destructive sentence in the family's history. He alleged the Pope had annulled the marriage to have the freedom to enjoy himself with his own daughter. The incest rumour, amplified by the historian Guicciardini and a generation of hostile poets, would follow Lucrezia to her grave. Giovanni signed the impotence confession. The annulment was granted in December 1497. Her second husband, Alfonso of Aragon, Duke of Bisceglie, was the illegitimate son of Alfonso II of Naples and reportedly the fairest youth in Rome. They married on the 21st of July, 1498. The marriage was apparently happy. Lucrezia was made governor of Spoleto in 1499, the first woman to hold a position ordinarily reserved for cardinals. Then the political winds shifted toward France and the Neapolitan alliance became expendable. On the 15th of July, 1500, Alfonso was attacked on the steps of St. Peter's by hired assassins armed with halberds, stabbed in the head, arm and leg. But he survived. Lucrezia and Alfonso's sister Sancha nursed him. Lucrezia prepared all his food herself, fearing poison. On the 18th of August, 1500, while Alfonso was recovering in bed, Michelotto Corella, Cesare's personal enforcer, entered the room and strangled him. One source records Cesare visiting Alfonso earlier and whispering that what was not finished at breakfast would be complete by dinner. Their son, Rodrigo of Aragon, born the 1st of November 1499, was sent to Bari. He died of illness in August 1512 at the age of 12. The third marriage was to Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara. The d'Este family considered the Borgias beneath them and resisted until pressure from Louis XII and papal threats made refusal impossible. The dowry was extraordinary, 100,000 ducats in cash, the castles of Cento and La Pieve, reduced annual papal tribute, and a trousseau valued at another 100,000 ducats. A single dress cost 15,000 ducats. The proxy marriage took place on the 30th of December, 1501. The ceremony in person was on the 2nd of February, 1502 in Ferrara. By the summer of 1503, the Borgia Empire was at its apex. Alexander controlled the papacy. Cesare controlled the Romagna. Lucrezia was Duchess of Ferrara. The French alliance held. The treasury was full. On the 6th of August, Alexander and Cesare dined at Cardinal Castellesi's vineyard. Cesare told Machiavelli he had made provision for every exigency except the undreamed-of conjunction of his own and his father's sickness. I'm curious. Do you think any preparation could have saved the Borgias, or was the system designed to destroy them the moment the Pope stopped breathing? Let me know in the comments. The collapse took 11 weeks. On the night Alexander died, Cesare lay gravely ill in Castel Sant'Angelo with the same fever. His enforcer Michelotto Corella did not grieve. He went to the papal apartments with a dagger, threatened to cut Cardinal Casanova's throat, and seized roughly 100,000 ducats in cash along with enormous quantities of silver and plate. What Corella did not take, the servants stole. By morning the apartments were stripped. The Orsini and Colonna families, expelled from Rome by Alexander, re-entered the city within days. Cesare, carried in a litter, negotiated safe passage out of the Vatican. His Romagna territories revolted immediately. The rulers he had deposed returned. Venice seized cities opportunistically, claiming them before Cesare's governors could mount a defence. The empire he had built city by city over 4 years disintegrated in days. On the 22nd of September, the conclave elected Pius III, a compromise candidate sympathetic to Cesare, who reconfirmed him as Gonfalonier and Captain General of the Church. 26 days later, Pius was dead. It was the shortest effective pontificate in centuries. What followed was the decisive era of Cesare's life. Giuliano della Rovere, Cardinal of San Pietro in Vincoli, had been the Borgias' most implacable enemy for 11 years. He had fled Rome during Alexander's papacy, funded opposition from France, and spent a decade waiting for the moment that had now arrived. He approached Cesare with promises: support my candidacy, deliver your 11 Spanish cardinals' votes, and I will maintain you as Gonfaloniere. Protect your territories, honour every agreement. Cesare delivered the votes. On the 1st of November 1503, Giuliano della Rovere was elected Pope Julius II after the shortest conclave in history, approximately 10 hours. He broke every promise immediately. Machiavelli's judgment was surgical. He who believes that new benefits will cause great personages to forget old injuries is deceived. Julius ordered the Borgia apartments sealed. He declared he would not live in the same rooms as the Borgias. All paintings made of the Borgias or for them were to be covered with black crepe. The apartments remained closed for 386 years until Pope Leo XIII reopened them in 1889. Cesare was arrested and imprisoned in the Torre Borgia, the same room in which Alfonso of Aragon had been strangled on his orders 3 years earlier. He was transferred to Naples, then shipped across the Mediterranean to Spain. Ferdinand of Aragon, who had no further use for a Borgia, imprisoned him first at the castle of Chinchilla de Monte-Aragon, and then moved him to the castle of La Mota in Medina del Campo after a failed escape attempt. On the night of the 25th of October, 1506, Cesare escaped. A priest sympathetic to his cause had smuggled rope into the cell piece by piece over weeks. His servant Juanito descended first, but the rope was too short. He fell and broke several bones. Cesare wrapped his hands in rags and began his own descent. The guards discovered him. They cut the rope from above. He fell, was knocked unconscious, and was badly injured. Men loyal to the Count of Benevente carried him to safety. It took a month to recover. He arrived in Pamplona on the 3rd of December, 1506, and was welcomed by his brother-in-law, King Jean d'Albret of Navarre. 3 months later, he was dead. On the 12th of March, 1507, Cesare was serving as captain of the Navarrese army, besieging the castle of Viana, held by forces loyal to the Count of Lorraine. A heavy storm broke in the early morning. An enemy raiding party sortied from the castle. Cesare gave chase alone, riding far ahead of his men into a ravine. 3 soldiers trapped him. A lance struck first, then the knives. A later examination found at least 25 stab wounds. His body was stripped of armour, clothing, valuables, and a leather mask that had covered half his face. He was left naked in the mud. His squire, Juanito Gracita, identified the stolen armour and wept. Cesare Borgia was 31 years old. King Jean ordered a marble mausoleum in the church of Santa Maria in Viana. The epitaph was carved in Spanish. Here lies in a little earth he whom all the world feared, and he who held peace and war in his hand. Between 1523 and 1608, the Bishop of Calahorra had the tomb destroyed, declaring it outrageous that such a sinner should lie in consecrated ground. The bones were reburied under the street. In 1945, workmen accidentally unearthed them during sewer construction. Forensic examination confirmed the remains. A lance wound of more than 2 centimetres, shoulder injuries consistent with the fall from La Mota. In 1953, the bones were reinterred outside the church entrance, where they remain today. A memorial slab reads, Cesare Borgia, Generalissimo of the Navarrese and Pontifical armies, died in the fields of Viana, 12 March 1507. His personal motto had been inscribed on his sword and stamped on his coinage. out Caesar, out nihil. One either Caesar or nothing. He got both. Lucrezia outlived Cesare by 12 years, and she did it by becoming someone else entirely. In Ferrara, she spoke 6 languages: Spanish, Catalan, Italian, French, Latin, and Greek. She attracted poets and scholars to a court that her father-in-law had considered too provincial for a Borgia. Ludovico Ariosto praised her beauty, virtue, chastity, and fortune in Orlando Furioso. The Chevalier Bayard, the most celebrated French soldier of the age, called her a pearl on this earth. The Venetian ambassador called her wise, discreet, and generous. Within 2 years of her arrival, the court had forgotten her past. She was known as La Buona Duchessa, the Good Duchess. Her correspondence with the poet Pietro Bembo is one of the great love stories of the Renaissance. When they met in October 1502 at a villa near Ferrara, he was 32, she was 22. Their letters, conducted covertly over 16 years with Lucrezia using the initials FF as concealment, survive at the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan, alongside a lock of her famous blonde hair. Bembo wrote to her of certain words spoken on the balcony with the moon as witness. He dedicated his masterwork, Gli Assolani, a dialogue on the nature of love, to her. In 1816, Lord Byron visited the Ambrosiana, called the letters the prettiest love letters in the world, and stole a strand of hair. She pawned her jewels in 1510 to pay for Ferrara's defences when Julius II, the same pope who had destroyed her family, waged war against the duchy. She served as regent of Ferrara twice during her husband Alfonso's absences. She bore Alfonso multiple children, including Ercole II, who became Duke of Ferrara, and Ippolito II, the cardinal who built the Villa d'Este at Tivoli. On the 14th of June 1519, she gave birth to her 10th child, a daughter named Isabella Maria. The child died the same day. Lucrezia never recovered. Puerperal fever set in. On approximately the 22nd of June, she dictated a final letter to Pope Leo X. "Most Holy Father," she wrote, "having suffered greatly for more than 2 months because of a difficult pregnancy, I must yield to nature." She asked for a blessing on her soul and said she recognized the end of her life and felt that within a few hours she would be out of it. Alfonso d'Este rushed to her bedside. Doctors bled her, cut off her hair, tried to force her to eat. She lost the ability to speak. She lost the ability to see. She died at Belriguardo Castle on the 24th of June, 1519. She was 39 years old. Alfonso wrote afterward that he could not put it into words without tears. So much was it for him to see himself deprived of such a sweet and dear companion. She was shrouded in the habit of a tertiary Franciscan and buried at the convent of Corpus Domini in Ferrara. Her tomb remains there today. Geoffrey, the youngest of Vanozza's children, disappeared into the margins of history the moment Alexander died. He lost every papal grant overnight, but Squillus, a Neapolitan feudal holding beyond the reach of Julius II, remained his. His wife Sancha of Aragon died on the 16th of November, 1506, childless. He remarried to Maria de Milla de Aragon and had 4 children, including Francesco Borgia de Milla, who became the second prince of Squillus. Geoffrey died in January 1517. His descendants held Squillus until 1735. No chronicler recorded his last words. No poet mentioned his name. Giovanni the Infans Romanus carried a mystery that 2 papal bulls failed to resolve. The public bull of the 1st of September 1501 declared him the illegitimate son of Cesare Borgia by an unmarried woman. The secret bull, issued the same day, corrected the record, "Since you bear this deficiency, not from the said duke, but from us and the said woman." The public attribution to Cesare was a legal fiction. The secret bull preserved Alexander's own paternity for inheritance purposes. So Giovanni was made Duke of Nepi. After the collapse, he lost the title. He was passed between guardians before finding refuge with Lucrezia in Ferrara, accepted as her half-brother. He served as a minor papal functionary, had 3 daughters, and died in obscurity around 1548. His mother was never identified. Vanozza de Catane outlived almost all of them. She spent her final years in charitable works, earning the honorific La Magnifica. She died on November 15, 18, at the age of 76. Pope Leo X ordered the entire papal court to attend her funeral, a ceremony described as carrying pomp almost equal to a cardinal. She was buried at Santa Maria del Popolo. In 1594, Pope Clement VIII ordered her tomb removed. The tombstone was found face down in 1948, unused as flooring for centuries. It now rests in the portico of the Basilica of San Marco. Giulia Farnesi's affair with Alexander ended around 1500. She remarried Giovanni Capece Bozzuto, governed the castle of Carbognano for 16 years, and died on the 23rd of March 1524, at the age of 49 or 50, in the Roman house of her brother Alessandro. Alessandro, the petticoat cardinal, whose career she had launched with a single request in 1493, became Pope Paul III in 1534. He convened the Council of Trent, established the Roman Inquisition, approved the Society of Jesus, and commissioned Michelangelo to paint the Last Judgment on the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel. The most lasting consequence of Alexander VI's papacy was not anything Alexander did. It was the cardinal's hat his mistress secured for her brother. Subscribing takes 5 seconds and helps this channel reach more people. That's all. Juan Borgia's great-grandson was born on the 28th of October, 1510. His name was Francisco de Borja. He became the 4th Duke of Gandia and served at the court of Emperor Charles V. In 1539, he was entrusted with escorting the body of Empress Isabella to her burial in Granada. When the coffin was opened for the required identification of the corpse, the face was so ravaged by decomposition that it was barely recognizable as human. Francisco reportedly declared, "Never again will I serve a master who can die." After his wife died in 1546, he entered the Society of Jesus. He became the 3rd Superior General of the Jesuits in 1565. And he was beatified in 1624 and canonized on the 20th of June 1670 by Pope Clement X. The most notoriously corrupt papal family in history produced a saint within 2 generations. The Borgia apartments in the Vatican are open to visitors now. They house the collection of modern religious art on the route to the Sistine Chapel. The frescoes Pinturicchio painted for Alexander between 1492 and 1494 include what may be the earliest European depiction of Native Americans. Cesare's bones lie under a slab in Navarre. Lucrezia's tomb is in Ferrara. A lock of her hair is in Milan, in the same library where Byron stole a strand 2 centuries ago. Vanozza's tombstone spent 400 years face down on a floor. The current Duchess of Gandia is Angela Maria de Ulloa. Sui Maidesan Munneituant, born 1973. Through Lucrezia's son Ercole II, the Borgia bloodline runs through the House of Savoy, the Bourbons of France and Spain, and half the royal houses of Europe. The family that held peace and war in its hand left behind a saint, a lock of hair and a tombstone that no one thought to turn over for 4 centuries.